I don't know what Adult Protective Services would do without our victim advocates. The victim advocates for me are just a deep resource of community services. They are absolutely laser focused on the victim's safety. They're laser focused on safety planning for that person. What is it that that person wants done? And just as importantly, what it is that that person doesn't want done. What are the parameters? But they're the advocate within the spectrum of services that that person wants them to be in. Now, Adult Protective Services is looking more of the family role. Yes, absolutely concentrating on the older victim. That's our client, but it's more of a broader approach. And it's not either or. To me, it's both is the best way to serve the older victim.
I work a lot with DV advocates. I told a DV advocate, I asked this question actually, a person is 59 and a victim of domestic violence, but when they turn 60, they're a victim of elder abuse. There's a very thin line. These cases often look alike. I think the difference is whether the person is voluntary or involuntary. So when the person is voluntary, there's more resources probably available through domestic violence programs because you have to be able to be engaged by the advocate. But for a person who is a victim of elder abuse and involuntary and denying that abuse is occurring, there's a different intervention that's necessary and maybe not as many resources available. Adult Protective Services workers are usually work under regulations. So there are some state regulations that mandate that and mandates. Advocate, their role is usually a voluntary role. So if the victim doesn't want help, the advocate usually cannot help them. And Adult Protective Services, that differs a bit. We may meet some clients where we're mandated to assist them, and that assistance can be voluntary or involuntary.
I think Adult Protective Services in the community would be a wonderful initial collaboration if an agency is considering working with older adults around sexual violence. In my former position, we had a grant in Pennsylvania to cross-train older adult protective service workers and rape crisis advocates on the issue of elder sexual violence. And what we found is that protective service workers were not seeing a lot of sexual violence cases and did not feel necessarily as comfortable with those cases. And rape crisis centers did not see a lot of elder victims and then were questioning their skill set in working with those individuals. So both had some apprehensions in terms of providing services in a seamless and meaningful way. So what we found really worked best is creating a relationship before a case occurs. These cases may not be very common. You may not see them that often depending on your community. Rural areas may not see one for a couple years. But when that case occurs, it is so important to provide a seamless, accessible response to that elder victim of sexual violence. So forming a relationship, perhaps reaching out to Adult Protective Services, letting them know who you are, letting them know the services that you provide, and also thinking through how you could best provide services to the victim. So Adult Protective Services will clearly know that some folks don't have transportation. So how could you work around that now instead of when a victim is coming forward or perhaps APS is calling on their behalf and there is kind of a uncomfortable conversation about service provision. So really just forming that relationship and having both entities aware of each other's services.
As a whole, Adult Protective Services are overworked and understaffed, and so it's important to realize that oftentimes in collaboration when social workers who are adult protective service workers say, I can't get away from my office, they really mean they can't get away from their office. They're on call or they're having to be there to answer the phone. And so one solution to that is to meet at their office. to hear their needs and to respond to that. As with any role, as with any agency working with collaboration, it's important to look to understand what that agency's primary goal is and to see how the collaboration can help them achieve that.